don't adequately sum up what we've gotten done to date for the new members of the commission, please feel free to jump in. Garen, I know you were integrally involved in a lot of the discussions with the prior administration as far as the plan itself, some of the zoning considerations and things like that. So as I recall, we were revisiting the actual zoning for each of the letters, not only for review, but to see if they were appropriate for the various sections of the city and if that would need to be revisited in any way, shape, or form by not only this commission, but by the Board of Aldermen. How far that process got along in the actual documentation of that, I would have to go back and look at a long string of old emails. Garen, if you want to jump in and talk a little bit about that.
Prior to the pandemic, the discussions, Jonathan and I and the mayor shared at the time, we kind of ran into a stumbling block because we were at a point where we needed better analytics. We needed more information about sales tax revenues, also future growth, future development information. We were looking at Sunset Hills comprehensive plan, which really has some projection items. It's really the part 2 of what this document, which is more like a historic document, kind of outlines our problems and where our weaknesses are. This is the one that Jonathan had penned in 2018. Of course, most of the data in this, as far as the financial data, is out of date at this point because we've had such a long period of time that's went by, and so some of that will change.
I'm going to interrupt just a second. Elliot, do you have access to that plan that Jonathan had started the draft of?
So this is where, again, you say you have to go back through your emails. I have so many versions of this. What he's got in his hand and what I presented to the board, I believe it are copies that were brought to one of these hearings and should all be the same, but it is kind of difficult for me to nail down exactly which version of this is the most current.
I sent you my last copy that Jonathan sent me in 2019.
And I think that is, from what I was able to verify, that may be the most recent, and I do have access and can distribute that to the commission at this, after we get going.
Right, as a follow-up.
Absolutely.
Pretty good. So the hard part was we were to the hard part, which was really, could the brain trust and staff have adequate time to actually go through and do the analytics? Was there anybody on staff that was actually capable of doing that? Was there anybody in the community that was capable of donating their time and efforts to do that type of analytics? And we were just kind of digging into that when the pandemic happened, and of course, then everything stopped at that point. So I think at this point, a lot of the discussions that Mayor and Jonathan and I were having was, it was time to begin to think about getting proposals from outside consultant firms. It was an outside consultant firm that generated the first plan. And so with the document that Jonathan had generated, that's a great saver of fees because there's so much information in this that helps break things down for the consulting firm. And we were beginning to talk about fees for services from different consulting firms, range of $25,000 to $50,000, and that being taken to the Board of Aldermen, put into the budget, and then that work would begin and start. And then of course, all that ended with the pandemic. So that was kind of where everything ended, because this document, again, is just a great history lesson. It tells us where our weaknesses are. It has some really great things in it regarding that. And it takes a long time to go through and make the, just to read the document, really get your head wrapped around it. And I encourage you to go back into it and really read through it and see if you think there's things that may have changed.
Make sure they got what I wanted in there.
Yeah, I know some things have changed. Obviously, is our optimism about sales tax revenue. right? What will happen in future retail areas? You know, what's going on in the architectural world, you know, in the world of development right now, and what's being built, and what's not being built, and what won't be built ever again. So,
And just for the record, the prior complete and approved plan was dated back in 1970.
that's right. And I had
So-
actually never seen it until tonight.
Oh,
So,
wow. So that
Yes.
is still the current adopted comp plan for the city of Shrewsbury. This has not been set aside. This was approved recommended by the planning commission at the time and approved, not just the planning commission, but I did see a note in there that there was at the time, a community improvement committee that was involved in it way back in the 70s. So anyway,
and a quick blast through it, by the way, it is actually a really
it
good
is
plan.
fascinating.
Because it actually it does what it's supposed to, which is what other comp plans do. Comp plan is supposed to set forth the actions of the city for the future. Whether that's in allocation and zoning, and this is a true urban design. This has design drawings in it for the public features. It has, you know, these really nice things, and you see these, and when I look at when I do developments in other cities, I do look at the comp plan, and you see these things. They give you examples of what are good urban design ideas, what are good, you know, sustainable ideas for communities, and they try to implement those within their own community. And so this plan does that. And it's kind of fun to read back and see all the things that they were planning and they executed. So,
And that's the important part of this, is they did execute this all the way through the development of the former archdiocese grounds and developments along Watson Road, and it truly directed the development of that portion of the city for the second half of that century. And now we're at the point where, and Garen put it perfectly, everything is shifting post-COVID, and retail is so different now that it's almost a perfect time to do this now as opposed to 5 years ago when you guys were going through this. Because every developer I've spoken to in the last couple of years since I've been here has said everything we knew 5 years ago, we threw it out the window, right? So it's almost great that we do have this opening salvo of a historical document to get us going on this, but now we're able to spend, if the recommendation of this commission is followed by the board, spend city funds in a way that gets us further into the future, utilizing current trends and current data and analytics versus 5 years ago, pre-pandemic, when nobody really knew what was going to come up.
We certainly would have wasted our money. I mean, Sunset Hills has to be shaken in the boots at this point, because after reading their plan, and I would encourage you to go and read their plan, because it's a very, very good plan. The analytics that they did to predict where their money was going to come from for their city was dead smart on. And all the development you see in Sunset Hills is based on those analytics, based on, you need to make this land available for these developers to come in and do this work, because they will bring you X millions of dollars per year to help your city do all these other things that you want to do. It's spot on. I mean, really, they really executed their plan. And also in that analytics, they also state, here's where your weaknesses, here's where you're really weak. You really need to work on these things to make this better. And one was residential life and Sunset Hills, improve your police department, do this, do that. You know, it's some really good work. I mean, that firm really did a nice job. So that's, it would be in our discussions, especially with Mayor Shearer, was we really like that paper thing to be guiding us, to help us, you know, and it was really, you know, he was really enthusiastic about something like that.
Garen, the most recent draft that you had said that in reference back to Elliott, was the format similar to the 1970 plan? Is it easy to do kind of a side by side
Well,
to see how the changes would have been made from
So-
back then to now?
so the only thing that word for word, I think there's a lot of word corrections maybe between these, but there's no part two even in the copy that I have. So this is just part one. It's really a historic document, just to kind of lay out what the city is all about, zoning districts, broken down into all the different neighborhoods and the way that he did that. It doesn't offer, it's not like the original comprehensive plan where it offers up any movement forward.
Right. Well, and that's because we hadn't really gotten to that point.
Right.
Yes,
If I'm-
well,
Pardon. Just for the new board members and the people listening, when we talk about a lot of emails and stuff, the work the planning commission was doing at that time was over a long period of time. We would come in and we would talk about a certain section or segment
mhm,
with that. We would hash that out in planning work sessions. Let them, the administration, work on it from there and take that. We would come back in and work on another section. And so we progressed through this document here that you're referencing over many months
Yeah, and we had a public meeting.
in
too,
public,
remember?
yeah.
We had a big public meeting. We asked people to come in and give.
This wasn't
ideas, so.
just one of those, hey, we came in, I've looked at this,
yeah, it
and
wasn't a
said,
scatter shot over one or two meetings. It was,
Very
yeah.
deliberate, very something from point A to point B as we were looking at specifics and what the dynamics of the city has changed since here to here. What dynamics are new that didn't even exist in 70? So I just, for a reference or historical kind of context, that's how I see this being developed, or how I saw it coming together.
I have a question about that. Is all of it sounds like amazing discussion and very productive. Is any of that saved in a cumulative document?
Well, I think that's. the
That's
question
really
from
where,
that corner to that corner of the table. Yeah. Yeah,
Heard the results of the public, we had a large public meeting. We asked the public to come in and give their opinion. And there were forms and things given out,
Mhm.
and there should be a file somewhere with all the results of that in it.
There's a
And the
large
meeting notes, I
electronic
mean-
file as well as hard copy minutes from those meetings. And I guess that was one of the main goals of tonight's discussion as far as staff direction is what do you want me to inundate you with? Because I can give it all to you, or do we want to take a more measured approach to this? Start with the 70 plan for those of you who've never seen it. And certainly the newer members of the commission, and then go to the most current draft of this, and then get into kind of a background of how we approached it the last time. And really, we have to not completely start over, but we have to restart this process. I wasn't involved in it at all.
Right.
And neither was our current building commissioner, who's going to be heavily involved in this as well. And neither were 3 members of the commission. So at least 3. The timeline of that is even not quite clear to me. So I don't want to throw away the work product that was done. It is important and it is valuable. But you all and I can't relive the however many meetings that you worked through to get to that point. So anybody that needs something specific, I can find and get it out and distribute it. But I think it would be good for the commission to kind of come up with a laundry list of exactly where to start, what you need, and get kind of our homework list together for either a month from now, or we can do this every couple of months. Set that timeline. But I do want to impress upon you guys how important this comp plan is right now. I've got people calling my office all the time asking me about properties and what is allowable, what is an allowable use, and what is this property zoned for. And our current zoning code and our comp plan are antiquated, and it's a struggle to kind of piecemeal this together. And if we are going to get some larger projects done, which everybody seems to kind of have an idea of different areas of the city that they have a best practices, best idea for, this is where that starts and where the direction needs to come from, rather than a certain staff member or a certain elected official, or, even this group, it really have to be also then approved by the board. So it's a community-wide, and I'm glad to hear that you did some public hearings with community involvement, because that's also gonna be part of this. I think it would be appropriate to do surveys, and I heard the word charrette for the first time. I think that was part of this process previously. Anyway, I think that if we can get a game plan together
Yeah,
tonight.
I think the initial first step should be, and just, I'm throwing this out there for discussion, would be to anybody who's not as familiar with just the makings of a comp plan, is to take some, as a homework assignment, to go through the 1970 plan, since we all have it, to kind of familiarize yourself with what a general process of this looks like. Have the most recent draft that we can determine to be, have that sent out to the planning commission, also review that prior to our next meeting, and then meet, talk about the questions about our current plan, and maybe then set the steps of revisiting parts of that if necessary, or what is our next step after that. Because I think, like I said, I'm gonna be the first person to tell you, I've never gone through a comp plan from cover to cover. So it's gonna be a learning experience for me to take a look at it, and it may be for several of you as well. So that would be my first, that I think our homework assignment would be to take a look at that 70 plan and the most recent.
Also strongly encourage you to look up Sunset Hills.
Right.
And
About
I'll
Webster.
distribute that.
It's absolutely public.
I think Webster recently just kind of updated theirs as well, right? In the last few
I
years.
don't know. I've not done any, I was doing work in Sunset Hills at the time. And so we were actually in a board meeting just like this, but I was presenting for a client. And the discussion was about the comp plan and whether or not the project fit in. And I had to prepare for the meeting. I had to read the comp plan and see what they wanted to do for that particular property, which was really struggling and had been identified as a struggling property even in the comp plan. And so our new use for the property was something that it was the color art building, which had been a printer, a magazine printer for years and years and years. Printing went away. Technology changed the printing business completely. They had a white elephant on their hands, which was a building that sat empty for 8.5 years.
When you had the whole Toys R Us thing that has now been redone into the Bass
And
Pro
that's actually
Shops.
identified in the comp plan, but it's not. The redevelopment of retail areas is identified in the comp plan. And they pin it down dollar for dollar, where they're gonna get their future budget money. It's really interesting to read. It's a really good.
Elliot, would you be able to get that and distribute that out?
Absolutely.
Okay, I think that's a good start. Maybe our neighbors in Webster too, if we have anything there. That way we can all do kind of a little bone up on the plans to see around us, and I'm not saying you should familiarize yourself with every detail in the outside city plans, but maybe just a format or taking a look at it to say, hey, look, they really went into detail in these areas.
Those are the people we'll be quote competing with if we do are within this region, so we need to see where, I think that would be a logical.
Right, absolutely.
Sunset Hills identifies problems with St. County. The government with being a township in St. County and trying to unify. Very interesting.
I wonder if the county has any resources, if they have any kind of a high level overview of comprehensive plans around amongst the municipalities. Anybody, is that
I've dealt with county,
ambitious thinking?
I'm not aware of the county having compiled something like that.
other than they're gonna eat us.
Yeah.
Right, their comprehensive plan is
Like, maybe-
right, slowly
I think we're gonna
disintegrating
like
all
that.
the cities. I would say that along those lines, though, if somebody has a idea of a well-developed city over the last 10, 15 years that they want to see their comp plan, I'm sure they have one. If they've done it right, they have a comp plan that directed it, right? And I can get those very easily. Usually they're available on their websites.
Yeah.
But I'd be happy to compile a list or compile any that you do want to see.
I've actually
You can
submitted,
get lost in them. You
Oh,
say
yeah,
cover to
absolutely.
cover, you
Yeah.
have, a whole dissertation of information.
I will tell you that I really applaud the folks in Maplewood going back many years to the point where that entire development going up Hanley, wedged into Big Bend. I mean, they did a phenomenal job. Mayor Langston during his tenure as the mayor, and they did some amazing things. So I would be curious to see how much of that was covered in maybe a Maplewoods comp plan.
A lot.
Because
Yeah.
they're really
Very
not
close.
dissimilar from us from the standpoint of size, I guess, and
Residential, commercial,
residential, commercial mix,
Ratio.
exactly, Paul.
the
Yeah.
ratio there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
landlocked, have no
Yeah.
growth room. So-
Randy, you look like you might have had something you were gonna say a couple different times. I'm gonna recognize
That's
you.
right.
Please jump in.
Spirited discussion.
There you go.
I think it's important to capture some of the community's thoughts from the open house. I remember writing, I didn't bring those notes with me, writing some things down that I was really impressed by. So if that's, I don't know whether that was transcribed or how those comments were captured, but I think that would be worthwhile too. So you can stack things up, I guess, yeah. Several, Kirkwood, a couple of other local municipalities have their plans online. I don't know whether Webster does or not. I don't remember. And then you hit on something right off the bat about it's a new world now, and there's some pretty scholarly work that's been done by both universities and some community planners that's been published nationally about how things are changing for small cities and how they're having to reorder their priorities and to morph into something that they didn't think they would be doing just 4 or 5 years ago. So I thought it would be maybe just behoove us as individuals to go out and look at those. A lot of that stuff is available. Internet so much more now than even just 4 or 5 years ago. And everyone was I guess everyone was inside putting these on,
Exactly.
scanning them or something. The more resources, the better. Obviously, we can't read everything. We have other parts of our lives, right? But if you can triage those and find the gems, pull out that might be germane to us, is really something that I think would be worthwhile.
And go ahead.
No, that's,
I was going to
point.
build on that. It would be great to have maybe an online like a repository. My job, we use Google Drive a lot, but or some way that we can access this. This could be stacks and stacks of paper, and we did just have Earth Day after all. But if that's even possible, but also I think it's a great idea to have as many references as possible, because it only helps to build sound logic, to be able to cite a reference on what's working than just out of the air.
Well, and electronic copies would be so much easier on Elliot and very limited staff. So, yeah, I think that's whether it's links or email attachments, whatever we need to do to lessen the time of just at the copier and not wasting the resources.
Google Docs is great. Our IT department hasn't really gone with Google primarily. They've got they've recommended Dropbox pretty much, so we can set up a Dropbox for this. Anybody that needs a refresher on that, we can do. Here's the thing: as we get into this and we start filling up our Dropbox, Google Drive, whatever it may be, all of you may start. Your eyes may start getting wider and wider. And I don't want you to discount the idea that this group has its limitations. And there is a point where we may just say, it's time to hire a consultant. And that recommendation to the board, eventually we're going to have to do that anyway. As you discussed, the analytics of the intricacies of the sales tax figures, we can't do that in-house, not with everything else we got going on. So that data analysis is going to have to be done outside anyway. But as we get into this and we have our baseline of historical documents, starting place, and then we need some direction on exactly how to create the proper overlay district to encourage development of a certain area, or rezoning certain areas to encourage a different kind of development. Outside consultants can provide that information. And if this commission needs that help, we ask the board for it. You ask the board for it. I'm just your messenger, right?
Has that been discussed for in any budgetary
Well,
manners for future budget plans?
Not specific, I have been, laying the groundwork for comp plan. It just hasn't been brought up to this level where I felt comfortable asking for it, right? But we've done requests for organizational assessments, which we've got some consultants in-house working on that with the staff right now and the elected officials. As well as salary survey, consultants coming in for salary survey. We started talking about strategic planning and we've got some consultants coming in for that. So it's not outside of the realm of possibility that that is going to be something they consider, if it's fiscally
Yeah,
possible.
I see this as so crucial to laying out, I mean, when you have the combination of residential and business that we have, the business and the development of those areas, so they don't just sit vacant and non-income generating. This could literally factor into whether or not we get to keep our fire and our police and our ambulance and our parks and rec and our streets and things like that. I mean, the generation of income to the city for a city our size, that has to be to the forefront of the planning, which I think the board would certainly agree with.
My only request in any of this, though, is that we need a leader. We need somebody to set our agendas for us, to set work tasks, to ask other board members to help with tasks, and to kind of give us the drive forward. Somebody needs to lead this. That's my opinion. It was lacking a
As
little.
everyone takes one step back except Karen.
I really don't want to, we just need somebody to say, look, guys, we have a goal to get to this point, to this point, to this point. If there's reading assignments and things like that, it just needs to be one person assigned and just kind of takes the helm. And I go for it. So.
He just assigned you. That's on camera.
Funny, I thought I was the one who took the step back.
And it doesn't have to necessarily be a single person. You guys can divide up into subcommittees and do.
You don't have to be a czar. so.
Exactly, you can be, and that works out for some places, but if there's some of you who are like, this is it for me, this is what I got into this for, I'm really motivated to work on this, then, I suggest you look at this, make sure you can, digest it and, work with what we have. We don't have to decide that.
I was gonna say, I would like to say that would be one of the outcomes of the next meeting, is that we do establish who's going to, or whom multiple people are going to kind of divide and conquer this to go forward. So I think, like I said, our familiarizing ourselves with the comp plan process and documents that we can get our hands on, and also the specifics to ours, both the old and the new draft. I think that's a lot to be planning for in the next month, to meet then again in the last week of May.
Yeah, and maybe the leader is actually, maybe the person that helms this process is actually one of the elected officials. Maybe it's one of the Aldermen, maybe it's the mayor, or it was Felicity and it was Sam. They both were, they're kind of leading that process, asking questions, pushing Jonathan.
Sam was
on.
kind of taking the lead on it.
Sam was taking a
Because
lead
this
on
was-
it, and he was calling me in and calling other members in to talk about the comp plan, and
Kind of an area he identified as an area of concern,
absolutely. And he was
So
putting heat on
he was
Jonathan to get the work
kind of
done.
facilitating.
Yeah, and he was giving Jonathan the opportunity to get the work done too. And so that was, there was
In the
a
direction.
lot going on there. So that's absent at this point. Sure. We need, maybe one of the elected officials is one of those people that has to come in because they'll have to take that, they'll have to defend us in the Board of Alderman meeting. For what we asked for, right?
It's, yeah, it's good to at least have one of them who's completely in the dark when you make that recommendation. That's a good idea. You know, our finance commission has a designated liaison who's a member of the board that
There we
joins.
go.
You know, I've looked at the code as far as the makeup of this. I think the mayor is already technically a member of this plan commission, but that hasn't been in practice as the way it's been run. But you know, we could bring that to the board and say, hey, plan commission has asked for a member of the board or the mayor to serve in a advisory capacity or a liaison capacity throughout this plan commission or this comp plan process, and have them choose somebody. I mean, I'm sure there's one member of the board or the mayor who has this is their thing, right? You know, that they've all got their areas of expertise.
Yeah, I would like to see two things that you communicate, Elliot, to the board, and that is one, that the need for the consultant is on the horizon. And it's just a matter of time before we ask them to address that and put some money in the budget for that. Or put some money in the budget for that and then approve it down the road. And then two, that would be the other issue would be to look for some participatory leadership from a member or members of the board to be a part of this process for us.
Yeah,
Would
I
everybody
think they'd be
good with that?
they'd be really excited to get that
I'm fine with
invitation.
those two suggestions, yes.
Yes. Okay, and you were about ready to say something else, Paul? Were you?
Well, yeah.
You had that look on your face.
There
I've
is,
seen it
there's,
before.
there's a lot going on, because I think I'd have to ask the question, would it be fair to say the Board of Aldermen would have, if we had input there, or at least a representative at the table, they could take it back to the Board of Aldermen in their work sessions and communicate, because if we start getting off on a tangent here, that they're gonna come back and say it's a waste, then we know what, we're getting that direction.
Yeah,
I think
and
that's fair to
there'd be
say.
constant communication there to the board with
There's also
that
the
liaison.
other way too. 'Cause
Yeah.
For a while, I was attending every board meeting to listen to the budget,
Budget
kind of,
stuff.
you know, tie into those
We can-
conversations and things.
We
but
can see what's
I haven't
there.
been.
Now. You know, as far as the county aspect with Anna, to me, the county is so large and, you know, over the board and, you know, a little humor here. You know, they basically wanted to buy ours. Our goal, we want to remain a community, we want to remain a viable community and basically a residential community. This is what we're built on, and this is what the family life here is in Shrewsbury. And I think a lot of us have that interest in mind, but yet we got to stay current to be able to, for the better part, fund this and be able to control it.
I think the communication to the community is key throughout the process, because one of the things that I have found over the years and coming up on 30 years here in this city, and one thing that amazed me all along the process, whether it be the Walmart development or that whole redoing of that area, is the more you communicate to people of what the effects are going to be, but also the potential negative effects if you don't do certain things. I think that's the real eye opener for people, is just to say, well, what would you like to give up if we don't have this level of tax income coming in, or this level of residential taxes? Because if you want to remain a fairly significant residential area, then the burden of the city's income falls upon the residents. So there you go. You're
Yeah.
looking to the people who naturally, the first reaction is, I'm already paying too many taxes.
Yeah.
Well, you
More
know, that's,
proactive than reactive,
And
right?
being-
Exactly.
You plan the adapting that you need to do rather than just react to what external forces require.
Right, and just to be clear, I was trying to go for resources to not reinvent the wheel, so to speak, hoping there was something to reference, not to lean on,
Yeah.
you know? Because obviously I
Personally,
agree
even
with
working
that.
for the county for many years. I wouldn't want to reference anything.
Fair
they did.
enough, fair enough,
So
fair enough.
I will,
Check that.
full
as off the list.
I just want to have full disclosure on
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I'm not sure the county would be inclined to put together a library of things that would be of a resource for us.
It's just-
Yeah, of what, but if they happen to have,
It's there.
something
Yeah, like
about, right.
And that comes from, in my experience, doing policy work, it's more on a national level where there are resources, things like 50-state surveys from national Board of governors, things like that, that are existing research documents that provide solid, sound logic for us, but we need a more localized approach here where a federal level may not work, because it's very regional and very specific. So if that was what the county was my first thought, it was just the next level up, but
Sure.
To your point, though, we
Okay.
can't ignore county, we can't ignore MoDOT, we can't ignore the
Right,
utilities.
they're all players in that.
They've got their own plans for what they're gonna do in our city, in their rights of way, right? They've got that laid out, and some of that is going to be,
It's coming. One of these
It's
years,
integral.
it's one of these years, it's gonna be there.
so that's another aspect of this
Yeah.
that, can't be ignored, and I would not be surprised if they do have a 5-year, 10-year, 15-year plan that somehow impacts us.
Look at. But the other thing, Steve, I had to kind of go with where we're at. If I could task Garen with, you said you had something that you communicated to the previous administration, AKA Jonathan. If you have to see what might be different than what's sitting on the table here, otherwise, I'm kind of thinking what's sitting on the table here is going to be a good start of where we want to
Yeah.
continue from. One, as a member that was part of it, I'm going to have to review it because we did this in pieces. Two, as new members, you guys could look through it and look at areas in here and maybe bring your areas of concern. And this is where I think I would like to see coming together to where we can move this forward instead of trying to go back and reinvent piecing this together, maybe start with this with possible.
Yeah,
Life
that's,
changes,
and that's
yeah.
where I was kind of going with taking a look at that new draft to say, what has changed in the last 5 years since the discussions were first had that resulted in this?
I don't
And,
think there's gonna be, because we haven't had any discussions for 3 years.
right, but I mean, do we know something now that we didn't know then? That's gonna
Yes.
potentially make some changes to just that initial document that we've already got.
But those are gonna be part of our new task.
Right,
We're gonna have to go back and review it with this because quote has been said at this table. What's happening today isn't what was happening or projected years ago. So we need to evolve and grow there too.
Right.
But we also need to make this broad enough to where these things can be changed and brought to keep this a successful comp plan for years beyond this rather than a small focus with that. Getting to the quote IT stuff, it would be nice to gather some of this information and like, you're gonna have to help me with this. I know enough to be dangerous, so to speak, but when you start talking about drop boxes, yeah, I could learn. But if Elliot would maybe only just, if you're looking at gathering this information, you have this information somewhere on your wild world server, you have it. My little computer at home may not have the capacity. But if I had an index or a summary of what was available through you, that, hey, let me see the Webster Groves comp plan, make sure I've navigated correctly, you could send it. Or,
Yeah, you would have access to it without it actually being on your computer.
I
There would be a link to that.
well, yeah, until this all gets, like I said, if this overgrows with that, because I don't see them getting me IT permission to get VPN through into whatever the county, the Shrewsbury servers are. or-
Sure. I think that
and
that's a
things. But if I
great,
had it, I could put it in an area on my,
I see what you mean.
but
I certainly need to create that index, find it all, and then see, you know, I'll send it out to the group and if anything is on there or missing from there, I can add it,
We could
and
add
then
it,
we can put it all.
And
in
this
one
can
place.
this can be a continuing, index in,
Living document.
yeah,
Get
that
you
could
set
go,
up.
just so we know where, after I get through 2 comp plans, I might say, I don't want to look at another one anyway,
Sure.
It could be a simple,
It just,
doc with a
just-
link tree and it can be in
So-
Dropbox and.
and
Forget if you can upload.
I think what we're talking about too, I would like, and I don't know how this would be done, I would like this to really only be to the administrative staff, the city staff, which would include the various commissioners and commissions in here, so if the police want to look at it, that's fine. But as far as trying to make all this information available, at this point, this is for our working something here. As we develop something, or as we divert or fine tune or take something from another city or from another concept, that we fine tune for the city, let us put that in perspective to the city, which we will present to the public on that, rather than, trying to make this thing just boom, boom. I treat that more, what was the work session?
Well, our
where
working
we
documents will be ours to deal
can
with,
deal with.
whereas
But it's
anything
a
that's
work
public,
session.
already publicly available can
Because
be
this is a
available.
Public meeting here where, there was times when we were going through this, we had work sessions. So where it was just privy to us, what was going on with it. And I still see that need there to keep this in-house with our director, our co-chair, or whatever, with their keeping this.
Would work sessions like that be public sessions?
Yeah,
They would.
yeah, if there's forum of you guys,
So-
it'd be a public session unless it is specifically related to a document or a area that is exempt from
That I
Public
might,
record.
I just might be misleading myself.
There's a
on-
certain list of exemptions, and certainly I could see some areas of this potentially going that route where we could hold an executive or a closed section. But primarily, this is gonna be,
That's
and,
fine with
and
me
as,
too.
as the group has already kind of stated, it
Yeah.
needs to be a transparent, community-led
Mhm.
process anyway, but I could see some areas, certainly when we start talking about consultants and choosing, that would all be closed until one is chosen. And a contract is.
Those conversations that I had with Mayor Scheer and Jonathan, and those conversations were always not about the objectiveness or the end result of the comprehensive plan, not some direction that the city needed to go or anything like that. Those conversations were about how, the process of how are we going to generate this document and give the document life? How does it go to the board? How does it go to you guys? Those were, what are we missing? And I was just constantly pushing Jonathan to we got to move. It's a great document, but we got to move beyond that. What do we need? Well, here's Jonathan, here's what we need on this, and this. And Sam was asking us the same questions. What do we need? Well, in my opinion, and what I see in other comp plans, we need analytics, we need this, we need that. This will give you more focus and more clarity for the people. So that's what those conversations are about. There were a lot of them.
So for my benefit, can you explain to me the process in which, so you're saying that we would come up with ideas of ways that will change it? It has to be presented to the Board of Aldermen. Is there anything from a public aspect that has to approve a comp plan, or is that all within the
Well,
city?
My recommendation and what I've seen in other municipalities, so you have lots of public meetings. You have, which we've already done one.
Right.
There's going to be a process where you're going to do the analytics and you're going to find the real weakness points and get some initial solutions to those. You have another public meeting and you start to float those solutions to see what your community says. And
That's gonna be
There will
key, that
be-
those are planned at the appropriate times, that
there will be citizens that will not agree with you, and we'll have to listen to them. Charrettes are always held to kind of discuss some of the, even in this, this 1970s plan, there's some little design documents in there and things like that. Those charrettes are there to help discuss some of those kind of built environment, how the built environment can change. And right, Randy, I mean, that's kind of.
And as far as when you say, you know, how much of this is up to this group and the board versus the public, the next step after we do finalize a comp plan is a zoning ordinance. And that's where anything in the comp plan that doesn't fit on this map in front of you, that's where we have a whole different set of public hearings on zoning changes. And there are different requirements for how the notices go out. Those, you know, it's not like a public vote, but there's certainly a separate public process for how those zoning changes take place. And that's another reason why this is so important, because we're not going to be doing spot zoning, right? That everybody hates that, the idea of that. This is going to be the comp plan influencing and bringing to a completion the new zoning, if any new zoning is required. You know, as you get through this, you may say, hey, we've actually zoned the city pretty much how we want it now, but we want some different uses added in there, or we want to change kind of the, that's an example of how this would definitely be changed.
Well,
Your consultant may come to you and say, you need to define your uses a little bit better. For example, for like where we have the institutions that occupy a big part of the land. Many cities find those uses for those institutions. They say, okay, you're going to get granted that land to do the work that you're going to do, and we're going to give you a special zoning for that institutional use. And therefore you're restricted in what you do there. You can't always develop on what you want to develop there. And when you do develop, you have to come and ask permission, because your institutional use takes up resources. Your city is going through the struggle right now with not having a really great kind of grip on their zoning code and Washington. Everything. And then taking it out of the property. And so they're drying up your city. They're literally drying them up. And so the city is in that confrontation now with what used to be the reason why they were there. You know, they're really struggling. They're really struggling. So, you know, we have to have those discussions too.
Going back to the limitations of the municipal code, would it be good, and thinking along the lines of those touch bases with the BOA? You know, I want to be able to dream big, but veering not too far, of course, with whatever our current limitations are, mixed use being a good example. Do you guys think that we should incorporate that in there somehow, or complete our vision and then wait for the contractor or the consultant to tell us where the limitations are?
I would think that would be a discussion to be had as this goes along. Yeah, I don't think that's a put it off till later discussion. I think that's one of the things that we do. And also any current inquiries that we're hearing about. I mean, those are things to be discussed along the way too, because, you know, if someone is looking at a particular piece of property and they've got a real concrete plan for what to do with it, that should be a part of the discussion as to whether or not that's, you know, going to be done, you know, or at least proposed
Well, I mean,
to the board.
you guys have firsthand knowledge of how difficult development has been for the city of Shrewsbury. How many special use permits have you guys approved and given to the board that they have passed an ordinance that have not gone through? Because when it gets down to it, that property just didn't work. They thought it would, they got all the way through, and then it was way too expensive to develop on it because there were some details about that land that just made it too difficult. Or the market right now didn't fit for it. You know, there are a lot of things that for the public came out and knocked it down, right? There's things that I think you guys have experienced that make you perfectly well suited to this task.
Or that we're competing against other redevelopment areas. And so I pulled in somebody that was looking at the front of Rothman. It would have been great. They would have really brought us a lot of taxes and everything. And they got taken away from us by the city of St. Louis offering tax abatement. So I'm part of the Regional Development Corporation. So, I mean, we offer no incentives. So you wind up losing those people. So.
And, you know, there's parts of the city, parts of St. Louis that are or properties in the city of Shrewsbury that are divided in half with the city of St. Louis. And so another aspect of this that I've already started to kind of go down the road of is how do we get a working relationship with St. Louis City for some of these developments that are going to happen someday and we want to get out ahead of. And how do we want to work with them to do that? So we have to analyze their zoning code and how it gets right up against the uses they've approved that abut properties that we have, right? Or half
Okay,
and
I could
half.
probably help you with that.
So that's another aspect of this that's, you know, we don't just have Laclede Station. We've got the River to Bear on the other end that is, you know, not, I thought when I came here, the River to Bear was the city limits. A lot of people still think that, you know, even people who've lived here their whole lives don't really realize that the city limits stop right at the other side of the parking lot from bowling alley. And then you're in a whole nother jurisdiction. So those are things to consider on this too. And I'm glad we're having some of these conversations and getting some of these sort of, you know, it's a good starting place.
And I don't think that we can look 3-4 meetings down the way and already plan what we're going to do. I think we're doing this step by step as taking it in manageable chunks as well. Because to me, allowing a month to review multiple master plans and then reaching out, you know, for Elliot to reach out to the board, the city as a whole for participation in the process. We're gonna have to do this little by little. I mean, it's not something that we can know what we're gonna do in the fourth quarter and we're ready to kick off the ball at this point, so.
And playing devil's advocate, how much work will we as a group put into it and say we do hire a consultant to come in? Will either be nixed or redone by a consultant that comes in? I'm just asking that question. I mean, how much work do we want to put into it that could be changed by a consultant coming in and saying, well, no, that's not the way you should pursue that? Or
Well, I would anticipate that we're not going to be capable of doing the things that a consultant is going
Right.
to come in to do. We might have some general ideas that are out there. Well, ideas
Have an
don't
outline, so to speak?
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think we've got a lot of getting into the weeds where we're gonna cross paths with anything that might be a waste of our time that they're gonna redo. Because I think we're really gonna be more, we're gonna get it to this point, have the consultant that has the expertise to do it, come in and take what we're doing, move forward with it, and then we get,
More detail, more
yeah,
specifics, all
we
that.
get kind of updates as things go.
I think if you read the Sunset Hills comp plan, I think you see what I mean
Okay.
by that. Because the way that it's outlined and the way they really focus on answering a lot of those questions about how the land use is to be used in revenue. It's really pretty good. And that wouldn't be anything that we could do. I mean, just, I don't know about you personally, but I don't possess that talent. Yeah, I don't have the resources
Right.
and I don't even know where they get the resources. So I honestly,
And if any of you were, you'd have to recuse yourselves anyway, conflict of interest, so.
One of the things I work around the country and some of the smaller municipalities will invite a consultant come to to come to their meeting like this and talk about the whole process. Just, well, here's what we do. We do this every day, and here are the things that are important to us. If you can tell us about this, and if you can tell us how your community feels about development, and you can, just an hour-long engagement with someone like that, you can learn quite a bit about what the professionals look for when they get involved, and they'd like to see have that input prepared by us, that we can prepare. As you say, we might overextend ourselves, and you shouldn't have even bothered doing that. That's something that's gonna fit into.
That's kind of where I was getting at.
Yeah,
It's like,
picked up that.
yeah.
Before you get too far down the road in
Exactly.
any one thing, it's just to find out.
They're willing to do that. So there's a half a dozen pretty mighty more firms than I do in that, but they'd be willing to have someone come and sit and talk to you, talk to our group, and we'll talk a little bit about how the process works, and we'll feel better, like, okay, I didn't realize we should be looking at that.
And so as we sort of look to the next few months of this, we've got kind of our initial homework, everybody kind of get up to speed on where we've been and how we got to where we're at. And then I could easily set up, like I said, there's a bunch of them out there, and I have a few in mind that would come in and give, a rundown of that process and get, a feel for, and give the board or the commission a feel for what that's gonna look like in a true timeline. I mean, this is gonna take some time. This isn't something we're gonna be ready to jump on anytime soon, but I think it's good that we're starting on it.
And I think that may be the next step after our next meeting, which is we get together and talk about what we know and what we've learned about the plans and the draft. And then kind of set that goal for the next meeting to say, okay, now we need to have somebody kind of come in and say, you've had a month to look at what we've got already on the table. We don't want to go down the wrong road and spend time doing things that we shouldn't be doing and then not focused on the things that we really should.
Will these firms agree to do that, not being
Compensated for that.
exactly, or, promise that they're gonna get the work when the time
I've got a
comes?
few, and I've got a few contacts that would come in and give that kind of presentation.
Okay, good.
You're not asking for 6 or 8 hours. And lots
They're kind of-
research.
They're kind of interviewing, right? They're,
Exactly.
it's,
Absolutely.
If they get their foot in the door.
Contract time, contract.
yeah, I like that. So this is our intro meeting. We kind of pass out homework assignments. The next one, we review everything, kind of get a list together of questions ongoing questions. And then we invite somebody at the third meeting to kind of give us a rundown of best practices for moving forward. And before you know it, meeting 4, we got a plan ready to go.
Yeah, you're right. Talking about an aggressive timeline. I like the way you think, but I don't think Elliot realizes he's got to sleep.
Gave that a while. Yeah,
Mhm.
you guys, I'm sure it's in there somewhere.
I will shake up the fairy dust here that Elliot has put on there.
Right.
But a lot of the work we had done in the past was we were just looking at some of the older stuff, seeing what was outdated and things, and we were just making comments. It looks like, haven't read through extensively, but it looks like the ideas were posed in here. Like I was looking at residential 7, residential here, the zoning, the easy one. We looked at the zoning, this C1 doesn't need to be there. We had, so in here it's saying why we think this C1 ought to go away.
Yeah, there
It
is.
wasn't right, so there's that's the kind of stuff you're seeing here. Nothing was ever said that this is what is gonna be. I think, if I remember right, we were looking at R2, but what would we want to look at to go in here if the archdiocese would want to sell this property? I think we had that discussion. And the cure of ours was separate, but we were looking at this R2 district as it related to Laclede Station. This might not go to R2, and this may go to
I remember we were having a discussion about Big Ben.
a Big Ben.
the
The
Big Bend
corridor,
corridor. on Big
those are the
Bend,
kind
whether
of
that was
things
appropriate
is-
to be C1, or was there another use that we could use?
Overlay
That was-
districts, different taxing
Yeah,
districts.
and those are the kind of things that, for
Where
the new
development-
commissioners, that's the kind of
Right,
information.
where the consultant will
Yes,
help us though, is because they have so much contact with because they run planning firms and because they're hired by developers to help with planning issues when they want to come into a community and do something that they're not entitled to do. Because every developer will tell you, I love owning a piece of land. One of those developers owns a piece of land that's entitled up to the point that I can't use it for what I need to use it for to make money. And then I want to change the entitlement. So that's why planners have consulting firms, that come in and they go to the cities and they talk about why, if you want to build a Walmart and what you need to change, like PGAV did, what you need to change about the site, that's weak, the weakness of the site. We would look for those same kind of consultants to examine the topography, tell us what's going on in market trends, target those pieces of land, change your zoning code and the language of the zoning code one way or the next. Those would be the things that we would seek out of them. Just advice to us. We would make the ultimate decision on that.
Okay, so we got a lot to pull together for the next meeting, a lot of review time. Everybody's comfortable with what our plan is for the next meeting.
Just one
Go ahead,
question,
Mac.
talking about bringing somebody on from the Board of Aldermen. Are we talking about that at the next meeting? Are we, at what point in time do you want to bring a representative? Obviously, before somebody comes in.
We gotta throw a hook in the water and see who we can.
I was gonna say, that's probably the biggest thing at this point, is to see how aggressively somebody wants to be a part of the process. Do we have to go out and grab somebody and say, we really need you to be that person?
Right.
Or does somebody step up to say, yeah, I'm very interested in doing that. When's your next meeting? I'll be there. I'm hoping that it'll be the latter, not the former. And we'll let Elliot inform us as to whether he's dropped that hook in the water, and if Big Fish is.
Oh, you can have that discussion with the mayor. The current mayor is very familiar with the board, being a member of it for so many years, so he's gonna have a better feel for who he can maybe reach out to,
I agree.
because as everything else, I think the mayor is gonna be included as a quote.
Yeah.
He needs to
Staff is gonna get tied up in this too, because we
This is
talked
going-
about this before, but once the consultants come in, they're gonna want to meet with head of departments to find out things about the park. They're gonna want to find out, because they're gonna be doing green space analysis, they're gonna be looking at that. They're gonna be asking questions about the condition of our roads. What are projected replacements in roads and so forth, where our road weaknesses are.
Response times, public
Response
safety.
times, the public safety, fire department, police department, where are the enforcement areas that they're having trouble with? Is there ways that we can design the city in a different way to help protect the citizens?
And if they don't do all that, then they're not gonna be a good consultant.
It's
Honestly,
exactly
they're gonna
right.
cover the bases.
Yeah, they gotta cover it. It's a hard job.
And if anyone knows of any community members that has an expertise, can they join this effort also, or does this have to stay within the commission and Board of Aldermen?
They just wouldn't have a vote. They could be, you guys can bring anybody you want in an advisory capacity.
Yeah, and I think that would be a good thing, because the city already has an email blast. If we put that word out, to just say, hey, look, if anybody's got that interest, that expertise,
Yeah.
then please, contact us, and let us know, and, they can contact Elliot, or he can put my name and email address in there. And we could certainly meet for a cup of coffee and talk about what their interest might be.
Oh, yeah,
That can range
Great
from
idea.
landscape architects, right? Yeah. Architects, civil engineers. Randy, other professions, planners, obviously.
Sure.
Attorneys that deal with land use.
Oh, yeah.
So Elliot, if you could maybe think about crafting an email about that.
Almost like a call
Crafting might be a good word.
to,
What-
Call to service.
what you wish for some.
Plan commission needs you.
That's Steve.
And they'll be interviewing for my position when I resign. Hey, you did such a good job on that. We're gonna, boom. You know,
We're gonna deny you the resignation step for a while, Paul. You gotta be a part of this for a while at least.
I made that commitment.
You did, you said,
I made a commitment to get,
Paul,
to
if
be
you act-
around.
If you act crazy enough, they'll ask you.
Yeah. Full disclosure, I'm committed to see you. But once this is seen through, that light at the tunnel is awful big.
One of the things that I want to bring up that I think is obviously can be a part of this, because I know Garen had been working on a draft of about business plan submissions and proper paperwork and going through that. That's actually part of this process too, because we want to make sure that no matter what this plan turns out to be, when we're trying to attract businesses to the area, we want to make that not just easy, but the right way to go about submitting their proposals.
We lack an economic development plan and even a document that hand to future businesses that want to locate.
And just to say, hey, these are the things that you need to do to come to us to properly get it through the commissions that are appropriate, and then on to the Board of Aldermen. So that game plan, that playbook is something that I know Garen had drafted up, and I think that needs to be addressed as part of this whole process.
It's been that long.
It has been.
We're putting words in your mouth. Yeah, what we remember and what you remember and what you actually did might
Where
be
it
two
is on the
different things.
file, yeah.
We're just-
Document, but I do.
And the other thing is, city staffing at this point in time. Where are we at on things with that, Elliot, as far as your staff and people that will need to participate in this process? Or do we have any openings that still need to be filled?
I have currently a budgeted part-time deputy city clerk position that is unfilled. Actively seeking, that will help certainly with this process. But
For a building commission.
we have a part-time building commissioner, but, and the board, there is no budgeted full-time building commissioner position at this time. I've advocated for it, but as, as you guys get into this, you're gonna get an understanding of staff limitations, and I think we could be an advocate for, a planning department, a true building and housing department that can help out with this process, but we can get
Brian
down to,
Hurd still helping us from
Yeah.
Maplewood.
and he's
excellent.
he is as expert at this as he comes. And everybody in St. Louis knows him. And certainly he's gonna be able to provide some of that technical expertise in this process, but in a limited capacity because he is part-time and it's 10 hours a week. So, and he's still gotta get all of our building plans reviewed and out the door and consult with people that have differing opinions about code enforcement. But anyway, I think we do have the capacity to get this initial phase going. And then, as we get into it now, certainly as other things come up for this body to decide upon, special use permits, that I know are in the works but haven't been presented yet, that's certainly gonna take up a bulk of any given meeting that we have, where the work session on this will be, later in the evening. So,
Well, and I anticipate, and we did this the last time through, is that, we might have to have those specific extra meetings, to do that.
I think at the time, most of the board members were fine with that as long as we had a schedule.
Yeah.
We didn't mind giving the time.
And what's nice is that based on Elliot's process, once the first of the month hits, we'll know whether or not we've got something to deal with at the end of the month. So then we can say,
But that might give us an extra set of time
exactly,
to come in and do. Other than that, we know we got this to do. Let's do that the second week, and if something's there,
Yeah.
third week, well,
Yeah.
Especially with, as you said earlier in the meeting, you want the board to kind of look at this as it's being developed and give feedback. You know, if we wait till the end of the month to meet on this, we're past their work sessions. They gotta wait almost 4 weeks to get to it. So it is kind of a necessary thing to have something before their work sessions. And we don't have to do that every month, but you know, as we progress through this, if we're gonna have something for them to chew on and give feedback on, we're gonna have to get it to them mid-month for them to look
so
at.
that's why maybe we can take a look at our schedules for, you know, even the remainder of the year, the calendar year, to say, is the second Wednesday a month dedicated to this process after we meet at the end of May, and that way we leave our end of the month meeting for the special use permits as per the normal process. But if there's nothing there, then we do the next meeting in this process in the meantime.
quick homework.
So if you all, the last part of the homework would be to look at your schedules to see if that because we're always going to be at least the second Wednesday and the last Wednesday, which would be the fourth or the fifth Wednesday of every month for our normal meetings. So everybody can kind of look through that. And you need to look at that too, because you've got a life outside of your job too.
There's a Mrs. Brown who's not gonna
Yeah.
like that. but Figure it out. I'm just replaying that in my head or projecting how that conversation. would go. But,
The
you
future
know,
former
the
Mrs.
future
Brown.
of Shrewsbury. Right. Right, I don't think we're quite there yet unless you guys start doing 3 a month.
And Garen
Carol?
mentioned, summer vacations and all that. Do we, for those work sessions, do we have to have a quorum? A certain number in order to hold? those? I would think we
You
would
only need a
want them.
quorum if you're gonna vote on something. I mean, this meeting could have taken place without a quorum, certainly, so.
One thing we have that we didn't have before is we have Zoom.
We have Zoom and we also have a full board, which I don't even think we had a full 9 at any point in time.
Well, we had a
No, we
full
always-
board, we just didn't have.
The attendance,
Showing up.
Yeah.
People that.
Which is
we
what
had
they-
names in the slots, but not everybody was showing up.
And
Right.
I've commented many times to other people and the administrative staff that I'm glad we've gotten.
Yeah, we all got
the new
used to
board
see each
members
other,
that
but
we have.
you guys are nice to see on a regular basis too. 'Cause
It was a nice addition to this, and it made our lives a little easier to get quote the quorum and get an effective citizenship on this board. So to answer your question, I'm pretty much available most times, so I very rarely will you see that I couldn't be here through the middle of the week, but
I appreciate that. So
you
that,
know.
that's the last piece
but
of
I'm a
homework
retired old fart, so, you know,
is to plan for that. So,
2 months. Stop
congratulations.
taking commissions. July.
You know, so, I just,
Not like a year to wind out the work. but
you know,
I got tired of planners. I can't stand
Oh,
it.
yeah, true. That ages you very quickly.
So-
Someone who's only 42.
No, thanks for that.
Steve, before we finish
Planners.
this,
yep.
I would like to get a copy of this. I think the city of Shrewsbury could pop to make some copies.
You can take
So-
that home with you.
Well, I would agree to share this
I
with
would also
Patrick.
like one.
No,
So-
I'd prefer it electronically if that's okay.
You can have it electronically, then I like hard copies. I
I
just,
would say
I'm
right
old school.
now, if you want what's in front of you, you can take it home. If you don't, I'll be
Mine.
sending you
Yeah,
electronic.
I prefer the electronic
Oh, it is.
because, yeah.
Mark them up.
I sent you the last thing that I had.
And
Right.
that, and and I remember looking at it and it looked like it was somewhere
Pretty close
20,
to what
20,
we are.
yeah,
The only
2019.
thing I haven't done is I haven't went, because Jonathan shared with me the Word document and we had tracking on it.
Okay.
And I was helping him with some kind of language stuff and a few other things that
Yeah.
were kind of design oriented. I don't know how else to say that. It's like environmental issues and those kind of things, and I have to look and see where that document landed.
Well,
See if
and-
I can find that document.
I'm certainly gonna take this. And I'm gonna call Jonathan and ask him about it, right? I just wanted to make sure this group was on board with restarting this fully and dedicated to getting this process going. And I'll get with him now and kind of get an understanding.
I think the long-term health of our city depends upon it, because the fact that, I mean, we can't continue to look back to 1970 for a comp plan.
Oh, the
Yeah.
sales tax issue alone.
Right. Right.
is really-
Open what phone booths in there.
I would have normally said maybe we could plan for that second week of May, but I think we got a lot to review. So let's give it the full month of May and then get back. Plus then we'll also have anything potentially that comes in after the first.
Elliot, if the board, like if I email out to everybody, hey, there's a comp plan, here's Sunset Hills link. Can I do that, or do I need to send that to you for you to distribute?
I've already got it. I can email it to you tonight.
As long as I'm
No.
CC'd on it for record keeping purposes, you guys can.
I'm just, it's from a, I guess.
You take-
Yeah, and that's not a sunshine law violation, because you're just sending out a document for review. You're not asking for discussion. You're not looking for anything in return. You're just sending out something for reference that we've already talked about in a meeting.
It is a good reminder, though, once something does go out, a reply all with any kind of substantive discussion, asking for, that's where that gets into that area of potential violations. So, and if I'm CC'd on it, then you are adhering to the public records requirements. So just try to make sure
But
that.
like if I go in and I pull up City of St. Louis zoning code and I find out what our borderlands are, next to, and write you a little report, I just send that to you and then you can distribute, you just want to distribute.
I'd be
that.
happy to. You could send it out to everybody though, as long as I'm CC'd on it. Say, hey, here's what
But the
I,
safe
here's what I
way-
mentioned I was gonna, in the meeting that I was gonna send out.
The way we could do that, pardon me, the way we could do that is to send it to you, CC you and Steve as the president, and the chairman, and the city administrator, and then you can disseminate that information back.
Certainly, that's probably the best practice for us to be the point of contact and dissemination.
If I have a question about it. You know,
Also, especially while we're documenting resource gathering, if we're gonna be creating a link tree document. That would, if everything goes to one place where it can be collated and
Right.
gathered,
Rather
rather
than
That
just
way-
links flying around every day
Added.
everywhere.
Right, and that way, if Elliot's working with the IT folks to have that centralized place for us, he can drop that right in there for historical purposes, and then we'll always have the same location to go to find things.
Things aren't getting lots of emails.
Right. And Paul, to your point earlier about things not resting on your particular computer, if you've got a link to go to, then as long as you've got a Wi-Fi connection, you can get to
oh, I
things.
can, I
Yeah.
don't mind that, I can go, I could just see where. I'm not gonna get permission, if, I'm just trying to see what quote Dropbox is, if I can get to it, I'm fine.
Yeah.
And as long as the Shrewsbury wants to pay for the space, I'm fine. But if I wanna go get something individually and drop it, I just know I'm not gonna be able to get to the Shrewsbury quote server like I do my work server.
Right.
No,
To where
no,
they're gonna, there's just, I'm not,
Yeah, there's firewalls and there's permissions.
well,
things like
I'm
that,
just
so.
wanting to make sure I'm understanding.
That you'll have access.
Yep,
Right.
very good.
Thank you.
Elliot, do we have any new business other than what we've already talked about on the agenda? Moving on to item C.
I would just say that I do expect to have a special use permit application the first week of May, so that we will be meeting and discussing one. I've said that before, but I talked to them today and they're preparing it. So I should have a special use permit application for the board or the commission's review for the last week of May, which I think might
Which
be
we
the
did-
last day of May.
31st. Yep, May
For-
31st.
Or,
If they apply for it, you'll get it, but
Yep.
I don't wanna.
No specifics before that.
Spoilers.
Right. I don't wanna jinx. it.
So just one, or whether there's.
I only know of one, but there could be 8. Be great.
That wouldn't be great. Yeah,
There could
we'll
be,
order in that night.
there could be any number of things, that's what's so interesting about this is, without a clear direction for me to give people, we're kind of at the mercy of the market, right? I get all kinds of requests and my zoning authorization hat is on almost every day trying to figure out if it fits our approved uses for these different zones. I mean, I've never used the word haberdashery before I started working here, and now it's common that I have to go and look and make sure that a certain business is in fact a haberdashery. Anyway, and then,
That's not.
you guys, you lived through the issue with the cocktail lounge, right? Like
Yes.
restaurant / cocktail lounge, we gotta fix that. That should not be one thing in our zoning code. But anyway, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm dealing with things that are not the most concise
Very good.
or modern.
And since we haven't met since before the end of the previous year, we don't really have any old business to deal with at this point. So if everybody's good with, what are you knocking for, sir?
Sounds like somebody.
We need a motion.
So, sure, Connie, go ahead.
Correct me if I'm wrong, this would be old business. Is there an update on the frontage retail space on the Rothman property? Was that not supposed to be developed? And
So I can't disclose everything I know about it. I've had 3 other users look at that space. One was going to be a really nice user. I went and actually showed them the property and met with the property owners, and they met with the potential client, and that's the one that got taken away from by
okay.
regional development.
Because this was right before I joined the board when the Rothman site was approved, but so I don't have all of the hard copies. Wasn't that not is that a requirement of extra
No,
space?
it was not a requirement, and officially the city has received no applications or contacts from any developers for that. But when we authorized the redevelopment of that site, there was an included requirement to pay an annual pilot, payment in lieu of taxes,
Yeah.
which
They
gets
got
us,
carrots.
gets us through the next, I think there's 2 more
5
years.
5 years.
We've gone through, we're about to get our 3rd, so there'll be 2 more after this. So that is the protection for the city and the impetus upon the developer to do something, right? So they don't have to keep paying the sales tax for a property that has nothing there,
It's a
right? They want
significant
it
amount of
to,
money that they have to
it is,
pay, so it's the carrot and the stick, and.
it is.
And I think
like
part
it.
of the-
With stick, so we get money every time we hit them with the stick.
And part of the original proposal for that was approved was that part was developed to a certain level so that it would be ready for,
They're not renting as well. What I say, the original ownership has left. So Bo and Matt, that you guys had met, they have sold out, so their partners have taken over. And that's about as much of that situation as I can disclose. The active ownership group, I think, is Premier. They're not marketing it the way that Bo and Matt marketed it. They were really trying hard to get Starbucks in. That's who we were talking to when I met with you guys. Starbucks was talking to us, and we had an agreement with Starbucks even. And then Starbucks went up the road because county was enticing them to go up the road to the McDonald's site, but they haven't followed through on that. So they can't get the McDonald's to let go of their,
which McDonald's site?
the old McDonald's in Marlboro.
Next to
Oh, in Marlboro, oh,
Yeah.
next to the lanes.
The old Lulu's.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They thought that was a better site. I kept saying it's not a better site. I was having discussions with the development people at Starbucks. They're pretty high level, saying, look, we've got a brand new neighborhood going in. They will be trafficking through the site. We actually reestablished the connector road to try to help with that traffic count there, which should be effective in that. But what really happened to us, we had written agreements and written understandings that they would develop the site. And then Starbucks had a major management change, and the person we were talking to went away. And it was Keith Peters was helping us too, so he had a contact with. So, and then that person went away.
So the last question, what happens after the 5-year pilot runs? It's just,
There will be a fully functioning restaurant there / retail development that will be paying us more than we're getting in pilot. That is, I'm going to whittle that into
Okay.
existence. No,
Take
honestly,
good notes
then
on that.
it's a vacant lot until something happens there.
Okay.
It is a
Wanted to make sure I understood.
difficult site to develop because of, I
Traffic.
mean, well, no, not because of traffic, because it's a lot like the Walmart site, which is in a hole. And that doesn't bode well for retail. The use, this last person that I was hoping would go there was, it would have really been a good site for them. And I talked to Gateway BMW, but unfortunately they were already in process of developing out their new location in Chesterfield, but they were interested in the site for a while. That would have been a good use for the site, for them to have such a generous site for their motorcycle business. But since the pandemic, that whole business has changed. And so a lot of those businesses that were looking at the site have been too, so.
I also remember that Watson, that part is state-owned, 66 road, so like traffic lights would be a nightmare to try to install there, or at least a lot of red tape.
We had a start when we were working with Starbucks. We did have a discussion with MoDOT and it's instantly shut down. So it just didn't even go, you know, so.
Okay.
We talked about changing aprons with MoDOT and that didn't go. There was some hurdles there, but I still think it's a great site. I think the hard part that we were having with, as the developer, is you almost have to bring somebody to the site to see where the potential is, to really understand the potential. And that's very difficult. There needs to be an active, and this is what I'm disappointed in the group that owns the site now, is they're not taking an active marketing campaign. They're paying the pilot. As long as they continue to pay the pilot, that's fine, but we really wanted to see them actively market the site, put a sign on the site saying it's available.
Yeah.
They're not doing that, right?
Well, there's no structure there. Nobody knows that it's even available for development.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know if the city can say something, because please keep your site.
Well, and I don't know how
Can't
much of
force
this.
it, but the city could, I guess.
Right,
You
and
could
I
say
don't know
the
how
site's
much of
available.
this is really, open conversation, but I have spoken to they were partners in the initial development.
Yeah.
So they're not necessarily new owners, but they are now full owners of this site. And they're based out of, I always forget, it's either Memphis or Louisville. Memphis. And that getting any out of state owner to focus on something here is difficult as it is, but they also have properties all over the place and they have a functioning storage facility, which is kind of their bread and butter. So I'm gonna get them, I'm gonna keep pushing on them. They are on my call list every single week and we're gonna get something in there. I'm willing this into existence. But it's gonna take some time, and again, we gotta get people to the site. City's gotta market it. Get it going, but although circling back, no, it wasn't part of the redevelopment agreement to have something there, or else,
Okay, yeah, thanks. I'm curious on the update on that, so thanks for all.
Yeah.
Well, the pilot was the protection. for the
Pilot is
city.
that.
Yeah, that's what that was. To make sure that we at least gain the revenue over the past 5 years, which is actually more revenue than the building had ever generated the whole 5 years prior. to that.
Right.
So building was only generating, when it was operational, it was only generating, I think, about $30,000 in sales tax revenue. So it's pretty low sales tax revenue. So right now it's generating more money. And it's also direct money. It goes directly to Shrewsbury's coffers. It doesn't go through the state or anything like that.
No, they read
So
the
it
check.
goes right into the coffers. It's a lot more.
In that regard, were we on new business or old business?
Well, we were on old business. We already went past new business. The old business was honest questions about the existing things that we've already run through.
It really was a point that I was gonna bring up too, because as a board, we've approved things as a commission with, recommendations to approve to the Board of Aldermen, and they ultimately have that choice. But part of the approvals we've done over the years have always been, I don't know how to say that, as the aldermen have approved it, and like the old quote Rothman's place come in, the landscaping place on, Weil and other places, part of that, and I'm glad to see that frontage work on Weil is where my mind's going, because they were promised that was part of the agreement, that would be improved. And once they got in there and got their business operating, they just forgot. And, just looking into it and checking it, it's coming, but I just want to make sure as a board, we look at those things later and put something in place that the Board of Aldermen can approve, like, the Rothman site, it's gonna have a little bit of teeth afterwards if these people just, the developers just come up and say, not gonna do it.
Pilots are really good tools.
So I need to understand it, one, but I want to be able to, this is something when something is going to come in front of the board again, we've got all these great plans. If we can get this done.
And from a staff experience, that has been very frustrating, because I do get those calls from those residents that say,
Yeah,
we were promised
because
X, Y, and Z, and then I
they're here
show
at
the
meetings too.
eventual permit that was approved in that ordinance, and I say, well, here are the clauses that ended up in it. And nowhere does it say that they have to put in that frontage walkway, or they have to do this by a certain date.
And make sure the motion gets directed at least to the Board of Aldermen now.
Yeah, the pilot is a really good tool, because they get, and one thing we made sure of, Jonathan and myself, as we worked on that, was to make sure that the pilot was written into the deed. So the land can't be transferred, even if this current developer sells the property tomorrow, the pilot continues. So those deed restrictions are really essential tools. That takes staff time, that takes legal time. I mean, there's some serious time that goes into a lot of that.
But I appreciate your point about the follow-up of things
I
that,
see these things. I'm not talking about the fences. I mean, we've had these caveats thrown out at us, and, with those, we've approved some of this, some of the previous plans. And it has
You
been
have those-
frustrating to
you
me.
have
that-
those improvements put onto a plat, towards the plat. And then when the plat is recorded, you make sure that you tie the occupancy permit to
To
that aspect.
Aspect.
And when they fail to do it, then you call the recorder's office and you remove the plat. And that removes their occupancy permit, the business collapses and no longer occupying the valid.
well, and the
Those are
other thing,
enforcement tools you have
I
at
just,
disposal, and you're right. Board needs to make sure that those things are implemented. The problem is, I don't think our zoning code has the teeth necessary to support.
Do they have to have a time limit? Because right now,
Usually, yes.
they're doing it. I mean, they're putting in,
They're
they're,
supposed to be a year,
Yeah,
sometimes
but it-
3 and
well,
years.
that's
So
been
that's-
a while ago.
but I guess that's what we would decide or make the recommendations. Commission, the board has the final say so. They can
right,
say,
and that's was gonna be my,
It's too restrictive. We're gonna be a little bit more, as long as I've had my say so within this commission, you could vote me down and I'm fine.
Yeah, generally.
Or
though,
if we
it's-
make a
it's-
recommendation.
It's generally staff that that come up, staff are guided by the comprehensive plan. In any other city I've worked in, staff are guided by the comprehensive plan. If there's something that they want to see done that's part of the comprehensive plan, whether that's landscaping borders or whether that's so on and so forth, staff is guided by that. And the development order is what it's called, it's a legal document. The development order has set forth the conditions of approval. And that development order gets recorded onto the plat and recorded at the time of permitting. And so, and the board reviews the development order. Not they don't ask for those things because the development order should have that already figured out in the comprehensive plan. And so the development order has all those things, and if the developer fails to comply to that, then the city has the teeth in their documents and based on their laws, go back and say, we're gonna take your occupancy permit, your business, you're gonna have to shut down tomorrow because you're not doing your work. And that's big dollars then, so you put them out of business, essentially.
Well, and the other
That's
thing
all
is
gotta be
that
written in a-
we as a commission can make those recommendations to the board, and then if there's, without a better term, the line item veto part of it, they can actually say, this, in order to make this deal happen, we're gonna take this part out of it or take this timeline out of it, and, you know, but we've done our job.
I just want to make
This
sure I'm
might be
doing my,
something that when
I
we
wanna
get
make
into
sure
the
that if
consultant
I-
for this, that's also
Yeah.
something that they can advise us.
and I just want to
Here's
make
the
sure
law.
that's going to be part of some of my thought process, you know, on some future projects. I just wanted to get the board because, you know, I've had some issues in my own mind with some of the developments that's come through and gone.
Let me give you a parting shot on this. State of Texas, state constitution says you can't, communities cannot have zoning laws. They absolutely prohibit zoning laws. Yet when you go down there and you go to Dallas or in Houston or any of those cities, you can see the results of that to some degree, but you also can see the great success of it. And the great success is, one is they pull more permits in a month than the state of Missouri pulls in a year. Okay, first of all, and just the growth is there. But they do all of their restrictions through deed restrictions, through title restrictions. So when I go in and I work in a community down there, the deed restriction sets forth all the conditions. And if I fail to meet those conditions, then the deed fails and the bank fails because the bank holds the notes. So I guarantee the banks are looking at that. So, you know, it's a different way of thinking about things, but Texas has a really unique way of thinking about it, and it's very successful.
And it's catching on. The planning field is starting to rethink zoning entirely.
Exactly, because of spot zoning, because every time you turn around, you think a piece of land's entitled to something and nobody likes the entitlement. So they come back and they ask for the change in entitlement, ties up boards like this. So maybe the answer for Shrewsbury is to remove the zone and have neighborhood deed restricted zones and allow the neighborhoods to invent their own restrictions. And that's a big concept. Sorry about that. That's a parting shot.
Definitely something to think about.
All right, very good. Seek a motion to adjourn. Aaron, you have a second here, and all in favor? Aye. Awesome. See you all on the 31st for sure, and maybe we'll have even more to do based on what Elliot has in his crystal ball.
Thank you for joining us on Zoom. We are closing the meeting now. Thank you.